Hello everybody, welcome to this week's Spotify session. Today I want to talk to you about emails. Emails are one of those topics that I talk about a fair bit because they come up so often when there is a dispute. So I have literally held mediations where the major topic of conversation has been about emails and the content of the email. There goes my bat phone again. The content of the email, the way in which it's laid out, people feeling that people are being brusque on email, a whole range of different things. So I wanted to talk to you about that today because I think we obviously use email a lot in our communication, and I think we need to think really carefully about how we use it so that we don't unintentionally cause an upset that we didn't mean to. So the first and foremost thing I want you to know is that email is an information tool, but it is a very poor communication tool. So it's very good to use email to confirm something that has been discussed, or to send through some information, or to be clear on facts, or whatever it is. However, it is a really terrible communication tool because it doesn't give you the opportunity to set a tone. And I know we can now use little graphics to say the smiley face or whatever, but that's not always acceptable in all workplaces. So what often happens is that somebody might be in a rush and they send an email off in a hurry. They don't write off or sign off the way they normally do, or they might not say dear so-and-so or whatever, and suddenly the tone of the email is that the person doesn't care, or that they're in trouble, or that something's wrong, or whatever. So, and the other thing you need to know is that email is a negative communication tool. So we will read the negative into an email first and foremost. So every time you send an email, even if you're trying to be upbeat, chances are that somebody will read the negative into whatever you're saying. So it's really important that we use email extremely carefully and cautiously rather than use it for all forms of communication, because it's a terrible way of getting information across. One of the things that I'm aware of is that we often end up negotiating complex, difficult situations via email because we don't actually want to pick up the phone and start that difficult conversation. So it's often a little bit of an opt-out of actually having to have a conversation when we think, oh, I'll just email this and then the other person can respond, and that way you don't have to communicate with them. The problem with that is that if you are in negotiations and the other person's reading negative into it and you're not necessarily on good terms anyway, chances are that that whole situation got a whole lot worse very quickly than not. In family law, I've seen it a lot where parents have used email to as basically as poison, as a form of ensuring that the other person feels hurt. And sometimes people use it to such an extent where I will say and recommend that the person receiving these hostile, poisonous emails gets an independent third party to read them first and foremost, and then to let them know whether or not there's anything in the content that they need to know, rather than read it themselves, because the intention of that painful, really cruel email is to cause pain, and we can avoid that. So, and when you get a third party to read those emails and just to give you the facts, and you stop being triggered by them, then you stop giving energy to the person who sent them, and eventually they stop getting rewarded for that behaviour because you're not being triggered and you're not responding. I know for a fact that there have been times when I have received an email that I didn't like, and I have immediately tapped away on the computer saying, and another thing, and you need to know this, and blah, 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 and I get really, really heated. And then a wise person, usually my husband, says, but you're not going to send that. And that's the rule. You can never send it. If you get one of those emails, you are triggered, you respond, go for your heart's content, pour out your life history, say how terrible the other person is, and then never send it. Never ever send it. If you've been triggered by an email, you need to very much sleep on it. You need to sleep on it, and you need to come back the next day and see whether or not you're triggered again and look at what you've written. And normally you would go, no, I'm not going to send that. You don't want to up the ante using email. It is just then a war of words that go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. It doesn't get you anywhere. So what I would encourage you to do is, when you are emailing, is to think, is this actually the best way to get this information across? Am I communicating, or am I actually just using this as an information tool? If you want to communicate, there are way better options. Just online, there are better options using Messenger and Slack and those communication tools, because the problem with email is that it goes back, and then this chain just grows of the same information over and over again. So it's very poor for communicating, but because you can't read tone into it, it has that other psychological impact on it as well. And there go the dogs, something's happened, some excitement out there. So constantly ask yourself, is there a better way to do this? Would picking up the telephone be more efficient and more effective? Am I going to be able to have a conversation and sort this out straight away, rather than this toing and froing using email? I'll then be able to use tone. I'll be able to demonstrate that I care, that I'm not attacking them, that we're looking at a way of negotiating this and sorting it out. So always, always, always look to what is the best option to communicate. And you can always follow it up with an email and say, this is what we agreed on, this is what we discussed today. But in the first instance, I would pick up the phone. And I know people don't like phones very much anymore, but really, email is not the tool to go for. The other thing that we need to be mindful of is when we CC people in. So sometimes people use email as an embarrassment tool. So they do it to make sure that the boss or someone senior is aware that somebody's made a mistake, or that there's an issue, or it should have been done better, or a whole range of different things. And so we say, dear John, this happened today. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. Signed off Kate, CC in big boss, CC in really big boss, just so that everybody's on the same page, so that they know what's going on. And I would call that public shaming. I think that's a completely inappropriate use of email. I think a better way of dealing with problems and situations when they arise is to pick up the phone, have a conversation. This happened, tell me what's going on, are you okay? You don't normally make mistakes, what can we do about it? All right, now that we know what we're going to do about it, we just need to let the boss know, and I'm going to CC you into that so that you know exactly what I've told the boss, but we just need to keep a paper trail. So then you send the email that you said you were going to send, so it's not public shaming. You can say to the big boss, this is what happened. I've spoken to Joe about it. This is the way Joe's going to fix this going forward. It's all sorted, just keeping you in the loop. Then you've got buy-in from everybody. You haven't shamed them. They might feel embarrassed, but they know that it's coming. It's part of the remedy. They've got a remedy anyway, so it's all sorted. And it's a supportive process rather than an undermining process. I can't tell you the number of times of what I see is people being embarrassed. So you CC in all of the people above to let them know that there's been a problem. But often the person might come back and say, oh no, actually it didn't happen like that, or I've got this solution. And the person who originally, sent the email and CC'd you in goes, oh, that's okay, but doesn't let the rest of the team know. So there's no sort of saving face on behalf. Oh, I set you up, I've embarrassed you, but now I'm just going to let you fall. I'm not going to embarrass myself further by going back and just letting everybody know that I made a mistake. It's just terrible leadership. So don't use email to embarrass people, because it's a cruel and unnecessary form of letting people know really basic information, and it doesn't help the organisation at all. The other thing about emails is that please don't email everybody. If you don't need to email people, don't email them. Don't create work that doesn't need to be created. Don't tell people things they don't need to know. It's time consuming. It leads to gossip if people are getting information that they don't have their head completely around, but they're just sort of being kept in the loop just because for one day this might happen or whatever. Be really mindful of how you use it, because it is one of those things that can come back to get you, because it's in writing and people keep copies of them. So you might think you've deleted something, but somebody else has got a copy. So my strong advice is always, if you've got something that you need to deal with, if it's a problem, if there's something important and people's feelings may be impacted on a day-by-day basis in the way in which a situation is tackled, resolved, looked at, if there's any problems at all, pick up the phone. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, it takes us out of our comfort zone, but it is a way better way of looking after people. And once you've started that conversation with, look, I'm really stressed, but I've noticed this has happened, can we have a talk about it? And you either arrange a meeting to talk about it or you talk about it there and then. But once you've had the conversation, you'll just feel like a weight has been lifted off you. You just rip off the Band-Aid and you go there. Whereas when you stay in email, you keep the conflict going. You just keep that level of communication at a distance, and you're not necessarily dealing with it at all. And just a reminder that if you do have to give somebody bad news, never give it on a Friday. It's not fair. Particularly Friday afternoon, it is not fair to lumber people with bad news via email, particularly on a Friday afternoon, because people don't have anywhere to go with that information. They can't then go and get some advice or talk to somebody up the line about what's going on here or whatever. You basically set them up to worry about something all weekend and then to come back on Monday, and you know what's going on because you might have started the whole process. You're the one who gave them the bad news, but they don't have anywhere to go to sort that out until Monday. It's not fair. You shouldn't that's not looking after people, I don't think. I think that if you've got to give people bad news, do it early in the week so people can access resources and services to deal with whatever problem there is. That's how you look after people. So when in doubt, look after people. Even if you don't like them, look after them, because at the end of the day, that will result in a much better outcome for you. All right, that's all from me. I will see you next week. I can't remember what I'm talking about next week, but no doubt I will send you an email and we will go there. All right, have a good week. It's much, much cooler now here in Radelaide, and I think I'm going to need a jumper this afternoon. All right, have a good one. See ya.